You're standing in your kitchen at 2 in the morning, staring at your phone screen as the numbers glow back at you. Your bank balance, your credit card statement, the monthly expenses that somehow always seem to outpace what comes in. There's this quiet ache in your chest. Not panic exactly, but something deeper. The weight of wondering if you're falling behind while everyone else seems to have figured out some invisible formula for building wealth. You scroll through social media and see friends posting about vacations, new cars, house purchases, and you can't help but wonder what you're missing. What rule are they following that you haven't discovered yet? Before we begin, remember, what follows isn't advice but reflection, a way to understand how money moves through thought and emotion. Halfway around the world, in a small apartment in Shanghai, a young woman named Li Kuei sits at her kitchen table with a simple notebook. She writes down every yuan that flows through her life, but her approach feels almost backwards to everything you've been taught about money. While Western financial wisdom often speaks about budgeting what you can afford to save after you spend, Li Wei operates from a different psychological framework entirely. She saves first, then spends what remains. It's not about deprivation or extreme frugality. It's about rewiring the very sequence of how her mind processes money. This is the essence of what researchers call the reversal principle in personal finance psychology. Where most people see saving as what happens after living, others see living as what happens after saving. It's a fundamental shift in the order of operations that changes everything about how wealth accumulates over time. The Chinese approach to money isn't just about percentages or numbers. It's about reimagining the relationship between earning and keeping, between today's desires and tomorrow's security. When you examine the behavioral patterns behind this approach, something fascinating emerges. The average household savings rate in China consistently hovers around 36%, meaning for every $100 earned, 36% of that $100 is saved. $36 never enters the spending equation. Compare this to savings rates in North America, where the typical household saves less than 10% of their income. The difference isn't just mathematical, it's psychological. It represents a completely different mental model for how money flows through a life. The reversal principle works because of something behavioral economists call sequence effects. When saving happens first, before you've mentally allocated money to expenses, your brain treats that saved amount as unavailable. It never enters your spending calculations. When saving happens last, after expenses, your mind has already claimed that money for other purposes. The exact same dollar amount feels either abundant or scarce, depending entirely on when in the sequence you encounter it. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research reveals that households who automate their savings before seeing their full paycheck consistently accumulate wealth faster than those who manually save whatever remains at month's end. The mechanism isn't willpower or discipline. It's about working with human psychology rather than against it. Your brain adapts to whatever baseline becomes normal. If you see a smaller amount as your starting point, that smaller amount feels sufficient. If you see the larger amount first, then try to subtract from it, every dollar saved feels like a loss. There's something almost meditative about this approach when you really consider it. Instead of constantly wrestling with decisions about what you can afford to save, you create a system where those decisions happen once, quietly, in the background. The mental energy that typically goes toward budgeting and calculating and second-guessing gets redirected toward other aspects of life. The anxiety that comes from wondering if you're saving enough gradually dissolves because saving becomes as automatic as breathing. This isn't about becoming someone who never enjoys life or never spends money on meaningful experiences. It's about recognizing that the sequence of financial decisions shapes their emotional weight. When you remove the daily negotiation with yourself about saving, you also remove the daily stress that accompanies those negotiations. The money that remains after saving doesn't carry the psychological burden of competing with your future security. It becomes genuinely free to spend without guilt or anxiety. What emerges from this reversal is a kind of financial calm that extends far beyond bank account balances. When your future self is already taken care of through automated systems, your present self can engage with money from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. The paradox is that by immediately removing money from circulation, you end up feeling wealthier with what remains. You begin to notice that the quality of financial decisions improves when they're not made under the pressure of balancing competing needs. The money you spend gets spent more intentionally because it represents true discretionary income rather than money borrowed from your future self. If this changed how you see money, subscribe and keep building your engine of understanding. Your next chapter is on screen. Understand, Draw, Grow. The mechanism reveals itself in the quietest moments of daily life. When you walk past that expensive coffee shop you used to frequent, there's no internal debate anymore about whether you can afford the $4 latte. The money for discretionary purchases exists in a separate mental compartment, already freed from the weight of competing with long-term security. You realize that what felt like restriction has actually become a form of liberation. This psychological shift creates ripple effects that extend far beyond monthly budgets. When your savings happen automatically, your relationship with money transforms from one of constant negotiation to one of quiet partnership. The stress that typically accompanies financial decisions begins to fade because the most important decision has already been made, systematically, without requiring daily willpower or complex calculations. There's something profound about how this changes the texture of everyday choices. The dinner out with friends, the spontaneous book purchase, the small gift for someone you care about. These moments carry a different emotional quality when they come from truly discretionary income. There's no shadow of guilt, no nagging voice wondering if this money should be saved instead. It's already been saved. What remains is genuinely free. The Chinese approach to wealth building operates on a principle that behavioral economists call temporal reframing. Instead of thinking about money as a resource that flows from present to future, it reverses the psychology to flow from future to present. Your future self becomes a real person with real needs who deserves to be paid first. Your present self gets what remains, but crucially, that remainder carries no psychological debt to tomorrow. This creates what researchers describe as a compound effect that goes beyond mathematics. Yes, the money grows through time and returns, but something more interesting happens to your nervous system. The background anxiety that accompanies financial uncertainty begins to dissolve. When you know your future is being systematically taken care of, your present moment becomes more available for engagement with life itself. You start to notice how much mental energy was previously consumed by low-level financial worry. The constant mental calculations about what you could afford, whether you were saving enough, if you were falling behind some invisible timeline, the energy gets freed up and redirected toward creativity, relationships, learning, and presence. The financial system you create serves not just your bank account, but your capacity to be fully alive in the world. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about this reversal principle is how it transforms the very nature of choice itself. When you operate from a foundation of automatic security, every financial decision becomes an expression of values rather than a negotiation with fear. The money you spend carries the lightness of true freedom because it was never borrowed from tomorrow's peace of mind. You realize that wealth isn't really about the numbers that accumulate in accounts somewhere in the digital distance. It's about the quality of presence you can bring to this moment, knowing that future moments have already been honored. The Chinese approach reveals something timeless about human psychology and the relationship between time and tranquility. In those quiet hours when you check your balance now, there's no racing heart, no mental calculations about whether you're falling behind some invisible standard. Just the calm recognition that money has become a partner in creating space for what matters most. The reversal principle teaches us that sometimes the most profound changes happen not through addition, but through reordering what was already there. If this brought you clarity, subscribe for more calm reflections that help you build your own engine of understanding. Understand, draw, grow.